All right, welcome to the introduction to GitHub. My name is Leon. I'm going to go over some of the basics of how to register for GitHub and get started with some fundamental usage instructions. So if you don't already know, GitHub is a web-based platform. It allows developers and data scientists to store, share, and collaborate on code repositories. And developers and data scientists alike can manage their source code for different projects and collaborate on those coding projects. So once you create your free account, you can go ahead and sign up here on the upper right-hand side. You will sign in. My information is already pre-populated, so I'm going to go ahead and click sign in. And usually it should be behind a two-factor authentication wall. And you would ideally register it with something like Duo Mobile. I also have the GitHub app. And on the GitHub app, it's prompting me to approve or reject this new sign-in request. I'm going to go ahead and tap approve on my phone. That's going to let me into GitHub. So once you're in GitHub, you see there's a lot of stuff here. It's like spaghetti on the wall, and you're all potential data scientists and already coding and developers are getting started. So you'll get used to this in due time. And so what you can do is navigate. So you have several options. On the left-hand side, here's your username. There's a drop down. You can access one of the teams that you're currently in, and you can also manage organizations that you're managing. You can select one of the repositories that you've been working on recently. These are just a few. You can click show more, or you can use the upper right hand icon with your profile picture to go to your profile, your repositories, your organizations, and so on and so forth. So if I click on your profile, I'm going to see my profile. And the way that this is structured is you'll see your profile picture, and then you can add different title subheadings. It's very much like any other social media platform in that regard. You can edit your profile to customize this. You'll see how many followers you have, and you can add a link to your website. There's some achievements, organizations again that you're part of. This is like a dashboard to your work. One of the things I want to draw your attention to, ladies and gentlemen, is that on the top middle portion, we have a section where we can pin our favorite repositories. And I believe as of right now, GitHub allows up to 6. So you can always change these and customize them later on. And then it also shows the number of contributions you've made in the last year. I have 1,032. You can also go back the previous year, and you can also look at these green squares. And the darker the squares, you'll see that's where you have the most activity by month. And there's a space here for how much of that activity was code review based versus issues versus pull requests versus commits, and a log of your contribution history, or otherwise known as activity overview. If you want to see a full list of your repositories, we'll click on repositories here up at the menu on top. And there's a list of 25 repositories that I currently have. So rather quickly, to create a new repository, all we have to do is click on the new icon in the upper right-hand corner of the page. And then we're asked to give this repo a name. We'll call it test_repo. The description field is optional. Below that, the radio button for public is selected. So we'll keep it public because we don't have anything sensitive or proprietary to share. However, that being said, we will go over the differences between both after this. And next, we are given the option of adding a README file. And so we'll go ahead and check off this box because a README file is very important because it provides essential information about the project that you're working on to anyone that's visiting your repo. So basically, it's the first thing that people are going to see when they visit your page, your repo. And it's very important to have a well-written README file because it'll help people understand what the project is about and how to use it. Now, without going into too many details, on a high level, your README file typically should include the following. You'll have your project description, which should be a brief depiction of what the project does and why it exists. Next, you'll have your installation instructions, which will provide information on how to install and set up the project on a local machine, followed by usage instructions. So these will be instructions on how to use the project. And then you might want to include contribution guidelines. So essentially providing information on how to contribute to the project. Now, as far as licensing information is concerned, this option is optional. You don't have to specify information on the licensing of the project and any restrictions on its use unless you want to. We're not going to. So we have one last step, and that is to click on Create Repository at the bottom of the page. And voila, we have our brand new test repository initiated with a README file and nothing else in it. Now, private repositories simply mean that you can hide them from the public and keep them on your account, work on them on your local machines, but not necessarily release this information to the public unless you go back into the settings. So for example, let's select this Redfin real estate repository as a guinea pig and go to settings over here, click on that and scroll down to the bottom where it says danger zone and change repository visibility. Right now it says it's currently private. I'm going to go ahead and click on change visibility and change it to public. So here it asks me, do I want to do this? I say yes. And then yes, I understand. And let's make it public. Now we'll go ahead and scroll down to the bottom again. Now it's currently public. Is that what I want? Sure. I mean, for now, and we can always change it back to private. So right now, notice here, it says public. So what I'm going to do here is introduce you to GitHub from this type of vantage point. So right now, we already have a working repository. This is a real estate, a private real estate linear regression model project that I've been working on. And the reason I had it set to private is because I simply wasn't ready to release the information. And, there's really no reason other than that. So changing it to public is not exactly something that I'm in fear of in any kind of way. And also, just for your own thoughts and use cases, you may ask yourself, well, why should I or shouldn't I change the repository from public to private or vice versa? Well, if there's any sensitive information that you need to protect, I would certainly encourage you to set your repository to private. So that's something that's really entirely up to you. Just be aware of what that does. And now that we're in this repository, see that's my username / the repository name. We're going to go ahead and clone this repository to our local machine because right now it's sitting on GitHub. Our goal is to get this over to our local machine, right? So we can work on it on our computer. So to do that, notice this green rectangular like icon. It has a drop down on it. Click on that and notice that we have this local tab for cloning. Right now it's set to HTTPS, and most of these will be set to that option by default. Sometimes for additional encryption, you might have it on SSH and so on and so forth. It really depends on the settings of the repository. We're not going to get into all that right now for this introductory video, so we'll stay with the basics. You should be more than fine to clone this through HTTPS. And so to do that, we're going to click on this copy icon over here. And then we're going to proceed to access our terminals. So if you have a Mac computer, you're in luck because the shell's already Unix based, and it'll be a lot easier to just do all those commands through the terminal. If you're on Windows, one thing you can do is download Git Bash, and that allows you to access the Unix based environment. And so I've decided to opt for the Bash, Git Bash version on Windows. Let's make this a little bit larger and enlarge the screen all the way. Okay, and now for some basic Unix scripting, what we need to do is cd. So we're going to use this command line to enter the working directory of our choice. Right now, we're just at the default. It's simply sitting on the C drive. What we want to do is, again, command into the working directory of our choice. So to do that, we're going to proceed to type in cd space documents. I know I want to do this in my documents folder. Press enter. And as you can see here, we're now in the documents folder. And if we want to inspect what's in the documents folder, we can simply type in ls, press enter, and that's going to list everything that's in our documents folder. Let's say we want to clone or copy this repository over to an additional folder within the documents folder. We'll simply repeat the step above and go cd, and let's put this in GitHub demo. Let's put it inside that folder. Press enter, and now we're in that folder as well. So now that we've entered that folder, what we want to do is proceed to use Git to clone this repository. So right here and now, it's important to make the distinction between Git and GitHub. Let's start by typing Git, because if we don't, it's so easy to get tripped up and confused down the process chain. So Git and GitHub are related, but distinct. So Git is a version control system. The GitHub is the interface that we were looking at on the internet. And one more thing I want to mention is with respect to Git versus GitHub, is that while Git can be used independently of GitHub, GitHub relies on Git. It's dependent on Git as its underlying version control systems. So hopefully that enables you to make that distinction going forward. So what we're doing now is leveraging this version control system Git in the command line to clone. So we're going to type in clone, the name, the link of this repository, and press enter. Notice how it quickly clones the repository to our local machine. I mean, we can see that here by way of the terminals, diagnostics, and proof of what it was just doing. But to actually witness it on the local machine, we can simply go into our documents folder, click into the GitHub demo folder, and notice how we now have this Redfin real estate folder that we just cloned to our local machine. So one of the first things I want to highlight or illustrate is this .git folder that's hidden or shaded lighter here. And I can't stress this enough. Do not, by any means, ever delete this folder. So it's the folder that contains all of the information about the Git repository in the directory. So if you delete this folder, you're going to lose all of the version control information for this repository, including the entire commit history. So you definitely do not ever want to delete this .git folder. Now notice how everything that was in that repository on GitHub is now once again on our local machine. All of the files and folders, and we're working on some Python functions over here. That's now on our local machine, and we have the Jupyter Notebook as well, and the ReadMe file. When I double click on it, it takes me straight to VS Code. I highly, highly recommend VS Code as a integrated development environment or platform for coding, as it allows you to code in multiple programming languages, as well as pull up any desired terminal like so. Well, this isn't particularly a lesson on VS Code, but what I just did was type on the keyboard Control tilde or that tick mark next to the number 1. And if I do that again, it's going to take away the terminal. If I do it again, it's going to bring it back. So right now we're on the Windows standard PowerShell. If I do a drop down over here, I can go back to Git Bash. And essentially that's using the same exact terminal that we were just looking at over here. The only difference is that we're doing it through VS Code. And this is why one of the reasons why I love this IDE. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and CD back into this directory. And I'm doing it twice, so just to kind of slow it down and show you how to do it multi-layered. You could always do it in one shot just by going CD documents slash, and if you forget the name of that folder again, ls, so CD documents slash GitHub demo, like so. And from there, we can do CD Redfin real estate, like so. And notice what happens when I have now cloned the repository and I'm in that last folder, the actual name of the repository. Right next to it, it has the name main in parentheses. What this means is that we're operating from the main branch. Our computer notices that, it recognizes that we're actually looking at a GitHub repository locally, and we're in the main branch. So we're not really going to go over branching in this demo. However, what this would look like on GitHub itself is when you're on this repository page, you'll see over here that your default branch is main. Sometimes it's called master. And so you can also create additional levels or different branches to collaborate on. So let's say I'm working on one project or one iteration of the same project. I can create my own branch, and a person that I'm collaborating with can do the same. And once we're done, we simply review the changes, track the changes, then merge them, and essentially bring them in, merge them into this main branch, and then we can delete the other branches that we created. Okay, so going back to VS Code, right now, all I have in this README file is it says Redfin Real Estate. Let's say I want to add my name. As an example, I just want to make a change to this README file so we can push this back out to GitHub. Right now, all of this is local. Remember, this is now just on our computer. So nothing we're doing right now is getting sent back out to GitHub until we tell it to otherwise. And so to do that, let's say, for example, I want to add my name, Leon Spanner. If I just start to type the commands to push this to GitHub, it's not going to work because we haven't saved the file yet. And how do I know that? Well, number one, I didn't press save. Number two, if you ever see this white circle next to the file that you're working on in VS Code, you know that you have not yet saved the file. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. And notice how that white circle over here goes away. And then, and only then, can we push this out to GitHub. So now there are 3 steps in pushing this information, these changes back out to GitHub. And for beginners, let's just stick with these 3. The first step is to proceed to type in git space add space dot in the terminal and then pressing enter. What this does is, well, number one, it's not, again, keep in mind, this is not a command that you run directly on GitHub. It's a command line interface that adds all the changes that were made to the working directory. And it takes these changes to the staging area. And that's what happens on the back end. So when you make changes to files in this Git repository, all of those changes are initially in the working directory, but they're not automatically included in the next commit. And commit is something we'll get to as a next step. So by using this git space add space dot, and remember, spaces are important, so everything has to be done precisely. Again, git space add space dot, you're essentially telling Git to stage all of these changes in the current directory and its subdirectories so that they're included in the next commit. So this is useful when you have made many changes across multiple files and you want to add them all to the staging area in one command. So that's what this does. And now once these changes are staged using git space add space dot, we proceed to type in git space commit space dash m for message, and then in parentheses type in the desired message of our commit. So I can say something along the lines of added name to README file. And let's not forget to close out our parentheses, or sorry, quotation marks. I always mix those up for some reason. It's a bad habit. And then press enter. So now we've committed this change. It's got a unique ID, main space, and then some alphanumeric characters after it. And we have a confirmation that one file was changed. There were 3 insertions and 1 deletion. As a last and final step, we're going to proceed to type in git space push space dash u space origin space, and wait a minute, stop right there. What's the name of our main branch? It's main. So we want to push this to the main branch. So before we press enter, this git space push space dash u space origin space main. I keep saying space because it's important that you not forget the spaces. These are absolute requirements. What this does, again, is push the changes that we just made in the local main branch. As you can see here, again, we're working from our local main branch. That means from our computers. And what it does is pushes this out to the remote repository to GitHub. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and press enter. And voila, we've now made changes to the repository. So to confirm that, we can go back to GitHub and then simply refresh the page. And now notice that the change we made by adding my name is now present and on GitHub. So that's how you clone a repository and make changes to it and push it back out to GitHub. So once again, in summary, we've covered the essential steps for creating a GitHub account, cloning a repository, and distinguishing Git from GitHub, as well as pushing local machine changes back out to GitHub.